The broadcast. The screens died first. Every display in the stellar compact, the holographic tray boards of the Van Exchange, the bioluminescent walls in the Hall of 100 Voices, even the cracked communicator in a dock worker's breast pocket on the dust world of Castle 4. All of them went black at precisely the same nanosecond. It was a feat of synchronized broadcasting the compact had not attempted in 2 centuries, not since the Vermilion Plague, not since the last time the galaxy truly needed to pay attention. 3 seconds of nothing. Then, the sigil of the compact. 9 concentric rings, slowly rotating, gold on black. Beneath it, text in every registered tongue. Mandatory viewing. Annoying compliance. Imprisonment. On Castle 4, a dock worker named Yena Osei set down her welding torch on the scaffolding of Bay 14 and looked up at the overhead display with the patience of someone the universe had never treated particularly well. She had worked these docks since before her son could walk. She had survived 16 mandatory broadcasts. She folded her arms and watched. The image resolved into a courtroom. It was the kind of room built not for justice, but for the theater of justice. Vaulted ceilings of dark obsidian stone curved inward like a clenched fist. 112 high arbiters sat in tiered thrones of carved bone coral, scales, chitin, feather crests, and one form, so ancient its biology had no name in any human registry. At the center of the floor, on a raised platform of cold alloy, stood a small figure in chains. He was 7 years old. The compact translation overlay confirmed his age in 11 languages and added his name, Nico Vasquez. Species, human. Colony registration, Terra 9. Crime, desecration of a sacred site. First degree, per Compact Statute 7, Article 4. The penalty, established 4,000 years before this child had been born, was death. The chains on his wrists were sized for an adult prisoner. They dragged his thin arms downward at an angle that looked almost supplicating, almost like a child asking to be held. He wore a school tunic, the collar crooked, the emblem of Terra 9 Colony Academy, still bright on the chest. Someone had not thought to change his clothes, or had thought to, and decided not to. He was not crying. That was the detail every person watching the broadcast would carry for the rest of their lives. The galaxy had expected a child to cry. It needed him to cry. The fear would make the proceedings comprehensible, would confirm that justice was operating correctly, that the child understood his position in the order of things. Fear was the one language every species shared. Nico Vasquez looked at 112 arbiters with eyes that were much too old for his face, and he did not cry. The chief arbiter was a Velthari named Sorvex Dunn, 220 years old, 90 of them on the bench, a creature of absolute institutional confidence. He rose, and the chamber fell silent. Nico Vasquez, designation human, age 7 standard cycles, has been found guilty of trespassing upon and contaminating the wellspring of Melos, a protected sacred site under compact jurisdiction. The contamination has been verified. The trespass is on record. The law is unambiguous. The sentence is mandated. He paused, as great judges do, granting the galaxy a moment to absorb the righteousness of the proceeding. Do you have final words? His tone expected weeping. Every species had their particular music of a small creature, finally understanding it was going to die. The rising pitch, the broken consonants. It was the sound that reminded watching civilizations that the compact's authority was total. The boy looked up at him. "My mother is coming," said Nico Vasquez. He said it quietly, the way a child reports that supper is ready or that it is raining outside. Plainly, with no room in it for doubt. The chamber laughed. It was not quite cruelty, not only cruelty. It was the laughter of adults encountering a child's impossible faith and feeling, briefly, the weight of their own long-dead certainties. The laughter of people who have forgotten what it felt like to believe completely in something. Sorvex Dunn let it settle, then spoke with the particular gentleness authority employs when it wishes to be remembered as kind. "Child, your mother is a patrol commander stationed 14 light-years from this court. Her vessel is registered as a single-wing corvette, unarmed for diplomatic transit. She cannot cross that distance before the sentence is carried out if she had already begun the journey, which she has not. She cannot reach you. No one can reach you. The law is the law." The boy absorbed this. He considered it with the seriousness children sometimes bring to hard truths. "I know," he said. "She will still come. She promised. No defiance. No desperation." A statement of fact delivered to a room full of beings who had collectively forgotten what faith looked like from the outside. The second round of laughter was quieter, more uncomfortable. The execution was carried out at the 19th hour, Compact Standard Time. The galaxy watched all of it. The Compact had made certain of that. On Castle 4, In Bay 14, Yena Osei did not look away. She had learned long ago that looking away was its own form of consent, a small, silent agreement to let the powerful do what they would do and pretend you had not seen. She had made that agreement once, years ago, during the labor suppression on Castle's northern continent, and she had never forgiven herself for it. So she watched. She watched the executioner enter. She watched the boy's face when he heard the footsteps. Not fear. She would insist afterward. Something more complicated than fear. Something closer to recognition or pity. She watched him close his eyes. She watched the blade fall. She did not cry, but she put her hand over her mouth and stood very still. And in the silence of Bay 14, she heard 40 workers breathing at the same pace, connected by the simple, obscene fact of what they had just witnessed together. The broadcast held on the boy's body for 30 seconds, long enough to be unambiguous. Then the chief arbiter faced the cameras directly. Let this serve as a reminder to all registered species. The law of the compact applies to every citizen of every world, regardless of age or species. This is not cruelty. This is consistency. Consistency is the foundation of civilization. The broadcast ended. Normal programming resumed. The analysts were already talking. The compact had delivered its lesson. It waited for humanity to accept it. It did not understand that somewhere, 14 light years away, a woman had already stopped waiting. The first sign came from the trading halls. Human merchants across 47 compact commercial venues walked away from their contracts on the same day. Not angrily, not dramatically. They simply stopped mid-sentence, packed their cases, and left without explanation. On Terminus Station, 12,000 human residents departed within 6 hours. Their shops were left unlocked. Meals sat half-eaten on tables. A child's toy cycled through its melody in an empty corridor for 3 days before a Keth station worker finally turned it off, and later told her children she still heard sometimes, in quiet moments, and could not explain why it made her grieve. The Stellar Compact News Network attempted to contact Terran Space for comment. Every channel returned the same response. Not unavailable. Not busy. No signal detected. As though an entire species had been erased from the communication grid in a single quiet night. Ambassador Trelvane of the Orati Confederacy had worked alongside the human diplomatic mission for 4 years. His counterpart, a man named Jonas Whitfield, had been competent and occasionally funny, willing to argue about history with the enthusiasm humans brought to things that had happened before their species reached orbit. Trell had considered it friendship. Whitfield's office was empty when Trell arrived the morning after the broadcast. Not abandoned, empty. Every item removed with the thoroughness of someone who knew they were not coming back. The family photograph that had occupied the same corner of the desk for 4 years, gone. The departure logs showed Whitfield had left on a human transport 9 hours after the execution. The ship's registered destination was Terra 9 Colony. It had entered jump space and never emerged on any scanner in the known network. Not destroyed, not detoured, gone, as cleanly as a door closing in another room. The Compact Council convened an emergency session on the 4th day. All 112 member species represented. The chamber was the same chamber where Nico Vasquez had died. No one had cleaned the platform. A few arbiters avoided looking at it. Others found themselves staring, trying to reconcile the absence with the event, to understand why the room felt smaller than it had before. Sorvex Dunn addressed the assembly with his customary authority. There is no cause for alarm. The humans are grieving. This is an emotional response to a necessary legal proceeding. Young species at this developmental stage often require. With respect, Chief Arbiter. The voice came from the 3rd tier. Counselor Miva Lorne of the Toluvian Directorate was small and sharp-featured, her skin cycling slowly through gray to deep violet, the Toluvian equivalent of controlled distress. She was 50 years old, and had spent 30 of them as a strategic analyst before accepting a council seat. She chose her moments carefully. Grief is loud, she said. Grief protests. Grief demands and weeps and makes speeches. This is not grief. This is silence, and silence from an entire species is not natural. It is deliberate. Something is happening that we are not seeing, and I would strongly suggest we begin trying to see it before it sees us. The chamber fell quiet. Sorvex Dunn's carapace rippled with irritation. The humans have 3 registered warships and a handful of patrol cutters. Their technology is generations behind ours. What, precisely, are you suggesting they could do? Miva Lorne looked at him for a moment. I don't know, she said. That's what frightens me. She sat down. Her words hung in the air like smoke. The council voted to send observer fleets to human territory. 3 groups, small, non-threatening, carrying diplomatic credentials and condolences. The chief arbiter assured everyone it was a formality. The humans would welcome the gesture. Dialogue would be restored. Everything would return to normal. The first fleet arrived at the edge of Terran space 2 days later, commanded by Captain Vorn Assel, a decorated Keth officer, 40 years of service, veteran of 4 interspecies conflicts. He was not afraid of humans. He had met them, curious, eager, desperate to prove themselves worthy of galactic acceptance. Like children playing at being adults, Assel's sensors swept the system and found nothing. No patrol ships, no defense satellites, no communication traffic. Not silence in the way a sleeping city is silent. Silence the way a city is silent when all its people have left. He ordered the fleet toward the primary human colony. As they approached, his tactical officer's voice went tight. "Captain, multiple contacts. Behind us." Assel turned to the display. 30 ships had materialized in a perfect sphere around his fleet. Not patrol vessels or science craft, but warships. Real warships, large and dark, and built for a single purpose, with no registry markings in any compact database. Where did they come from? No one answered because no one knew. Assel opened a channel. "This is Captain Vorn Assel, Compact Observer Fleet. We come in." Every light on every ship in his fleet went out. Not a power fluctuation, not an electromagnetic pulse. His analyst checked 3 times and found no trace of any known weapon discharge. The ships simply died. Floating in the black, 3 compact warships drifted helplessly, while through every viewport the crews watched the human vessels hang motionless around them. None of their weapons active, none of their running lights on. As though they did not need to be threatening. As though the point had already been made. The human ships vanished, jumped away in perfect synchronization, leaving Assel's fleet drifting in silence. 30 seconds later, power returned. Assel's communication officer found a transmission waiting. Audio only, source undetectable. A woman's voice, completely calm, as cold and flat as deep space. "Leave. Do not come back." That was all. Assel ordered his fleet to withdraw without discussion. The crew worked in silence the entire journey home. They had been soldiers and explorers for decades, and what had just happened had no context in their combined experience. The humans had not attacked. They had simply demonstrated that attacking was unnecessary. The second observer fleet never returned. The third found it 6 days later, drifting 2 light years from any star. Every crew member was dead. No wounds, no weapon signatures. Their bodies were intact, their health records normal up to the final moment. And then every heart had simply stopped beating at the same nanosecond. As though someone had reached into 300 chests and switched off the same switch. Carved into the hull of the flagship, in letters 12 meters tall, were 2 words in Old English. 27 minutes. It took compact translators 4 hours to decode it. When they finished, they wished they had not. The Compact Council realized, too late, that they were not dealing with grief. They were not dealing with protests or diplomatic maneuvering. They were dealing with something they had not encountered in 3,000 years of galactic history. A species that had stopped talking and started counting. And no one knew what would happen when the count reached 0. Commander Raya Voss had not always been a weapon. Once she had been a physics teacher at Terra 9 Colony Academy, explaining orbital mechanics to teenagers who could not yet understand why it mattered. She had loved the moment when understanding sparked in a student's eyes. That small, private brightness, the exact second when the universe got a little larger for someone. She had been patient then, full of hope. That was before the Keth suppression, when Keth enforcement fleets arrived in Terran space, demanding colonial submission and giving humanity 48 hours to comply or face bombardment. Earth's government scrambled for diplomatic solutions that no longer existed. Raya had been teaching on Terra 9 when the deadline expired. She had watched from the observation deck as Keth warships entered orbit. 8,000 colonists. Earth's fleet was 4 days away. The colony had 3 cargo haulers, some mining explosives, and industrial cutting lasers designed for asteroid work. Raya had looked at her students, terrified young people barely 20 years old, and made a decision that defined the rest of her life. She fought like a teacher protecting a class, not like a soldier. She used the planet's magnetic field as a shield, the asteroid belt as cover, and the Keth fleet's arrogance as a weapon. For 19 hours she led 3 cargo haulers in an impossible dance, never fighting directly, always making the Keth fleet chase what wasn't there, drawing attention away from the colony below. When Earth's fleet arrived, they found 2 Keth ships crippled and 1 fleeing. Raya's haulers were held together by emergency patches and hope. She had lost 31 volunteers who had joined her. 8,000 colonists were alive. The military offered her a commission. She accepted, not for glory, But because she understood something that day that she could not understand, the galaxy was not safe. The only way to protect children was to become something the galaxy was afraid to threaten. She rose through ranks quickly. Other commanders studied strategy. Raya studied enemies. Every species had a cultural blind spot, an assumption so foundational they could not see it. She discovered these blind spots and filed them away. She fought the Keth by abandoning honor when they expected honor. She stopped a Varian siege by evacuating the target planet entirely and destroying the supply chain the Vorians had spent a year building. She ended a compact-backed embargo by showing the compact's trading partners what human refusal looked like. Quietly, precisely, permanently. The Compact Council filed complaints. They called her dangerous. They demanded Earth rein her in. They also stopped threatening human worlds. Then she met a civilian engineer named Paulo Voss, who was funny and kind and completely unimpressed by her reputation. He loved her for who she was, not what she had built. They married quietly. When Nico was born, Raya held her son and made a promise she believed completely. This child would never need to fight. She would carry the darkness so he could live in the light. When a message came, priority alert, Nico arrested at the wellspring of Melos. Contamination confirmed. Trial date set. Raya had been conducting fleet exercises near the Terran outer marker. She read the charge sheet 3 times. Contamination. He was 7. He would not have known what the wellspring was. The exchange program had sent a child to a world he had never been to, and something in the water had cost him his life before anyone thought to put up a sign. She contacted Earth immediately. The politicians hesitated. The diplomats drafted statements. The legal team explained that challenging compact jurisdiction would take years. Years. She activated Protocol Nightfall. She had been building it for 3 years. Not because she had expected this. Because she had learned that the worst things were never surprises. They were the arrival of what you had been quietly, carefully, terribly preparing for. She hoped, every day of those 3 years, that she would never use it. The first strikes hit at precisely the same moment across 19 star systems. Compact military installations simply ceased to exist, not destroyed by explosions or conventional weapons. Erased, as though someone had reached into space and removed them. 340 defense satellites, gone in under 30 seconds. Shipyards building the next generation of compact warships became clouds of debris drifting in orbit. Communication relays connecting the Council's member worlds fell silent one by one, a chain of small deaths spreading outward from the core systems. Admiral Threxonum, commanding the compact home fleet, received the reports and did not understand them for almost a minute. His staff ran diagnostics. His tactical officer's voice was tight, with barely controlled fear. "Sir, I have no weapon signatures. No incoming projectiles. No energy discharge of any known type. They simply stopped existing." Onum tried to contact the Council. Jammed. Tried alternate frequencies. Jammed. Tried the quantum entanglement links that were supposed to be physically impossible to block. Those were jammed too. He sat in his command chair in the dark and felt, for the first time in 40 years of service, completely alone. Above the compact's capital world of Velthara Prime, 300 human ships materialized from jump space simultaneously, forming a perfect geometric grid in low orbit. They did not fire. They did not broadcast warnings. They simply hung there, blocking out the sun, and the people in the shadow below looked up and understood something with their bodies before their minds caught up. They had made a terrible mistake, and the mistake was here to explain itself. The planetary defense fleet launched 60 Velthari warships, the finest in the compact. They never reached orbit. Every reactor cut out at once, as though switched off by an indifferent hand. The ships fell back toward the planet on dead trajectories. Their crews evacuated in escape pods and watched their vessels burn up in the atmosphere. Not a single human weapon had been discharged. The Council managed to open communication through an emergency network no one had used in a century. Their message to the human fleet was dignified, careful, carefully desperate. Compact Council to human fleet. We call for an immediate cessation of hostilities and open dialogue. We are prepared to negotiate. The response came back within seconds. No. One word. A woman's voice. Counselor Miva Lorne, listening from the council chamber, recognized it immediately. She had met Commander Raya Voss once, at a diplomatic function, over drinks. They had talked about military history and the difficulty of protecting young species. Miva had liked her. That same voice was now cold and absolute in a way that made Miva think of stars. Not warm, distant stars, but dead ones, collapsed inward, pulling everything toward them. The Battle of Sigma Ridge lasted 4 hours. 3,000 compact ships, every ally the Council could call in on short notice, the Keth warfleets, the Varian dreadnoughts, the Hive automated swarms, against 300 human vessels. The compact admirals watched their tactical displays with grim satisfaction. Technology could be surpassing. Numbers were absolute. Raya Voss said, quietly, from the bridge of a ship called the Iron Meridian, "Release the Phantoms." 200 of her ships were not crewed. They were fully autonomous, designed for one purpose: confusion. They split from the main fleet and began appearing randomly throughout the compact formation. 2 seconds here, vanishing for seconds there, carrying energy signatures that violated known physics and weapon readings that corresponded to nothing in any database. Compact captains shouted contradictory orders. Ships maneuvered to engage contacts that disappeared before weapons could lock. The 3,000 ship formation collapsed into 3,000 individuals, each one alone and afraid. While the compact fleet fought shadows, the 100 real, human warships targeted communication relays, sensor hubs, and command vessels. Within 8 minutes, the compact fleet could not coordinate. Within 12, the Keth warchief withdrew rather than participate further in what he later, privately, described as the most complete humiliation of his career. Others followed. The battle dissolved. Raya did not pursue. She had not come to destroy the fleet. She had come to demonstrate that destroying it was a choice she had made not to make. On the 27th day, Raya Voss arrived above Velthara Prime alone. One ship against the capital world, the seat of 3,000 years of galactic authority. No escort, no fleet visible on any scanner. The Council watched from their chamber and could not decide if it was surrender or something they did not have a word for. A shuttle launched from the Iron Meridian and requested docking permission. After 40 minutes of debate, they granted it. Raya walked through the station corridors alone. No guards, no visible weapons. A woman in a fleet commander's uniform, walking with the unhurried pace of someone who had already finished calculating everything. She entered the Council chamber, the same chamber where her son had died, the platform still faintly stained despite the cleaning crew's work, and she looked at the spot for a long moment. Then she looked at 112 arbiters. She smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a teacher whose students have finally, exhaustingly, arrived at the answer she had been waiting for them to find. "You wanted to teach us a lesson," she said. Her voice was even. She walked slowly around the outer ring of the chamber, meeting the eyes of each arbiter in turn. "You wanted to show us what we were. Small, weak, guests in a galaxy that had been here long before us, subject to laws we didn't write in courts we couldn't challenge. You wanted us to understand our place." She stopped at the center of the room. "Thank you. We learned an enormous amount." Sorvex Dunn rose. His voice, for the first time in decades on that bench, was uncertain. "Commander Voss, we acknowledge that mistakes were made. We are prepared to discuss reparations, to review the statute, to..." She raised one hand, and he stopped. "Still not understanding," she said. "This is not a negotiation. This is a sentencing." She pulled a small projector from her pocket. The Council tensed. It cast a hologram. The battle at Sigma Ridge, the disabled satellites, the isolated worlds, the collapsed trade networks. Then a clock. 27 minutes, she said. "That is how long it took us to move every asset into position to end the stellar compact. Not weaken it. End it. We could have done it before you finish your morning prayers. We chose not to, and I want every person in this room to sit with the specific texture of that choice. That it was a choice, that it was ours, that it was mercy, and that mercy is not a permanent condition." Silence.